Delta Airlines and Qatar Airways faced the same looming crisis. Hundreds of aging aircraft were approaching retirement. Their fleets depended on jets that had once defined modern aviation, but no perfect replacement existed. Airlines needed something larger than a narrowbody, smaller than a traditional widebody, and efficient enough to make long, thin routes profitable. Then Boeing appeared to have the answer. The company unveiled plans for a revolutionary aircraft known as the 797, or New Midsize Airplane. It promised to fill one of the biggest gaps in commercial aviation. Delta and Qatar immediately took notice. But what happened next shocked both airlines. Because after years of anticipation, Boeing made a decision that changed the future of the industry. And the aircraft never left the drawing board. The story begins in the late 2010s, when Boeing quietly started studying a new aircraft category. The concept sat perfectly between the company's largest narrow-body jets and smallest wide-bodies. For airlines, the timing seemed perfect. Around the world, fleets of Boeing 757s and Boeing 767s were aging rapidly. These aircraft had spent decades serving routes that modern airliners struggled to replicate efficiently. They connected smaller cities across oceans, operated long domestic sectors, and handled passenger volumes that fell into an awkward middle ground. No modern aircraft truly replaced them. Few airlines felt this problem more than Delta. The carrier operated large fleets of both the Boeing 757 and Boeing 767. These aircraft formed the backbone of many important routes, from transatlantic services into secondary European cities to high-demand domestic flights across the United States. But age was becoming impossible to ignore. Fuel efficiency lagged behind modern standards. Maintenance costs continued to climb. Passenger expectations were evolving faster than the aircraft themselves. Delta needed a replacement, and the 797 looked almost tailor-made for the job. Industry observers quickly noticed that Delta's enthusiasm for Boeing's proposal was unusually strong. Throughout 2017 and 2018, executives openly discussed the concept, while analysts increasingly viewed Delta as a potential launch customer. At the center of that campaign was CEO Ed Bastian. Few airline leaders pushed harder for an aircraft than Bastian pushed for the 797. At conferences, investor events, and media interviews, he repeatedly urged Boeing to move forward. Every public appearance became another opportunity to make the case. His vision was straightforward. The 797 would allow airlines to profitably serve routes that sat between existing aircraft categories. Flights too large for narrow bodies, but too small for traditional wide bodies. Routes with steady demand that did not justify larger aircraft. For Delta, it solved multiple problems at once. Instead of replacing the Boeing 757 and Boeing 767 with separate aircraft types, the airline could potentially replace both with a single modern platform. That meant lower training costs, simpler maintenance, greater scheduling flexibility, better economics. The business case was compelling, and Delta wasn't alone. Qatar Airways expressed significant interest. Aircraft leasing giant AerCap publicly supported the concept. Qantas also discussed how the aircraft could fit into its future plans. But Delta remained Boeing's biggest champion. Then came the moment that stunned the aviation industry. In 2019, speaking publicly at an industry conference, Ed Bastian revealed just how serious Delta was. If Boeing launched the 797, Delta would consider ordering 200 aircraft. 200. This wasn't casual interest or exploratory discussions. It was potentially one of the largest launch commitments Boeing could have hoped for. Even after standard airline discounts, such an order would be worth tens of billions of dollars. The message could not have been clearer. Build the airplane, and Delta is ready to buy it. A commitment of that size would have transformed Delta's fleet strategy overnight. Hundreds of aging aircraft could be retired. Fleet complexity would shrink. Operating costs would fall. New routes would become economically viable. Delta could expand into markets that competitors struggled to serve profitably. The advantages would compound for decades. From the outside, Boeing seemed to have every reason to proceed. Then everything changed. Just as momentum behind the 797 was reaching its peak, Boeing entered the most difficult period in its modern history. The Boeing 737 MAX crisis exploded. Two tragic accidents led to a worldwide grounding of Boeing's best-selling aircraft. Regulators, airlines, and passengers demanded answers. Certification processes came under intense scrutiny. Billions of dollars disappeared as Boeing fought to restore confidence. The company's priorities shifted overnight. Instead of launching a new aircraft program, Boeing focused every available resource on fixing the MAX. Engineering teams were reassigned. Financial resources were redirected. Management attention became consumed by the crisis. The 797 suddenly moved from priority project to distant possibility. Then came another blow: COVID-19. The pandemic devastated global aviation. Airlines deferred deliveries, canceled orders, and focused on survival rather than expansion. Launching an all-new aircraft program during the worst downturn in aviation history became almost impossible to justify. While Boeing struggled, Airbus moved aggressively. The European manufacturer launched the A321XLR, targeting many of the same routes Boeing's proposed 797 was designed to serve. The timing could not have been better for Airbus, and it could not have been worse for Boeing. By the time Boeing finally regained stability, the market had changed. Airbus had established itself as the dominant player in the middle market segment. The A320neo family became the default solution for airlines searching for extended range and flexibility. Meanwhile, Boeing's answer remained unfinished. Many analysts believe the company missed its window entirely. The technologies available today make it difficult to justify the enormous investment required for a clean sheet aircraft program. What once looked like a major opportunity now appears far riskier. As a result, the 797 remains shelved indefinitely. For Delta, that outcome forced a complete rethink of its long-term fleet strategy. The airline eventually turned to alternative solutions. The Airbus A320neo assumed many of the missions once performed by the Boeing 757. New Boeing 780-710 aircraft began replacing portions of the aging Boeing 767 fleet. The strategy works, but it isn't perfect. The A320neo lacks some of the capacity Delta ideally wanted on certain routes. The Boeing 780-710 offers more aircraft than necessary on others. The 797 would have occupied the space directly between them, exactly where Delta needed it. Had Boeing launched the program, Delta's fleet might look completely different today. Hundreds of 797s could be flying across North America and the Atlantic. Operations would be streamlined, fleet complexity reduced, economics optimized. Instead, the aircraft exists only as one of aviation's biggest what-if stories. The demand that created the Boeing 757 and Boeing 767 has never disappeared. Airlines still need efficient aircraft positioned between narrow bodies and large wide bodies. The middle market gap remains real, but Boeing ultimately chose survival over expansion. Given the circumstances, it was probably the correct decision. Yet for Delta, Qatar Airways, and several other carriers, it meant watching their ideal aircraft disappear before it was ever built. For years, Ed Bastian publicly championed a vision centered around 200 Boeing 797s, a fleet that could transform Delta's future, a fleet Boeing never gave him the chance to buy. And one of the largest aircraft orders in aviation history remained nothing more than a promise waiting for an airplane that never arrived.